Hi ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Share Your Grin. Now, this one is most likely going to be like a podcast form with probably two parts at the very most to it. Essentially, we're going to be talking about a book that is like the grandfather of all self-help books. It is fantastic, and it's something that I think everybody should read. It's very rare that I'm like, well, yeah, there's like two books I can remember on the channel that I've told you guys about, with Winning in Mind by Larry Burr and this one, which essentially is called How to Make Friends and Influence People. And it's a really, really old self-help book, but it is timeless, and it is so fantastic. So essentially what this video is going to be, for me as well as hopefully other people who are in my position, I don't necessarily like to go back and reread the entire book, so I look for videos that kind of recap the book to a decent extent, and go into detail about the things that they found they matter to them. And also I find that interesting too, what person could take away from a subject, and maybe you're like, oh, I didn't even notice that, and that could maybe add to your experience. More or less, this is going to be a recap of the book for people who don't want to go back and reread or listen to it over again, although I do think this is the book that you should do that eventually at some point, because the stories and it's the way this book conveys its information that is brilliant, and it's how I think every book should do it. And a lot of books do it. Again, this is one of the books that came first. But essentially it attacks a problem from 6 different angles, asking you 6 different questions that all lead you to the same end. So, if you're able to not answer the first question, then you should be able to answer the second one, or the third one, or the fourth one. And that should be the way that you can kind of break down scenarios and situations to help better understand what you're supposed to do, or what you're trying to get out of them. Also, one of the things, this is just a really quick anecdote, this was a book that I was very worried to talk to you guys about, because it's very, well, first of all, I was implementing it whilst I was doing the streaming, the YouTube, the everything, so I was worried you guys were going to be like, Grin, I know you're doing that thing that the book says to do. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to improve and be a better person, more or less. And that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about right at the cuff, is if you hear the name of the book, which is How to Make Friends and Influence People, I think a lot of things pop in your mind, specifically with the last section of how to influence people. Or maybe it's, you know how you struggle making friends, Grin? It's not about any of that. And when it comes to like the influencing people, like the manipulation of others, no. It doesn't really tell you to do anything like that. All it does is it tells you the background conscious things that are happening within human beings, that can facilitate joy, happiness, the feeling of good feelings. And also it facilitates you becoming that person. So one of the things that we're going to get into and we're going to break down is like, appreciate others, but genuinely become a person that appreciates others. Don't become a person that just says things to gas people up, because that's flattery, but instead become a person that appreciates, that sees the value in the effort and the investment that people have put into things, people, and etc. And give value and appreciate the aspects of their character. And become the person that does that. Don't just pretend. And maybe there's an argument for you need to fake it for a little while, mechanically do the things that the book is telling you to do, and then eventually you can be like, okay, this is just a habit of mine now, rather than a mechanical process that I'm trying to do every day for 3 weeks, say. That's give or take the time it takes to make a good habit. Long story short, I'm going to be gushing about this book and the whole time we're reviewing, or like breaking it down, and this book has been out for a long time, but also definitely go out and read it, or listen to it. The audiobook is brilliant. The man who reads it to you is like just great tones, really syncs up, really like defines the words in an amazing way. Yes, but not long story short, you guys will see I love this book to pieces. It's something I think everybody should read, because it's like the foundational thing about how to interact with people, and yeah, we'll just get into it. By the way, I highly suggest you watch this video like a podcast, or you listen to this video like a podcast, because it's just going to be us ranting and raving about the pillars or the principles that exist within this book. There is basically 3 sets of major principles that it goes over. Which first one is basically how to make people want to be around you and enjoy being around you, and essentially how to make people like you and be friends with you, and etc. And the second one is how to persuade people, how to win an argument, kind of, which is basically to not have an argument. How to can be convincing. There's a bunch of people who might disagree with you and have strong opinions. How to understand that and convince them of otherwise. And then the last pillar, or last foundation, is essentially how to be a leader if you are put in a position of being in a leadership role. Yeah, and we're going to go over all 3 of them. Maybe not in this video. I think I'll go over the first 1 or 2 in this video, and then we'll see, because it's just a lot. Because how I did this and how I learned best is I listen to the audiobook, because that's what I do, and then I pause the audio, and then I go over to a separate document, and then I use the auto voice transcriber thing on Google just to write down jot notes of the things, and I rewrite them in the way that I would understand them. So there are going to be some notes that we're going to be talking about that people might be like, that wasn't in the book. Now that's just because I'm kind of dyslexic, and that helps me remember it in my way, in a weird way. It's complicated, I promise. Yeah, so again, just take note of that. It may be a nightmare, but we'll get through this together, all right? All right, so we're going to be going over the core principles for everything, all right? So we got principle 1, don't criticize, condemn, or complain. This is awesome. This is an excerpt from the book. If you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. You're going to destroy it entirely. You're not going to be able to get anything out of it. Bad. Don't kick over the beehive. And these are a bunch of quotes that I love to pieces. I don't know who exactly they're from, but it's judge not that ye not be judged. I think that's Abraham Lincoln, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of them are Abraham Lincoln. This guy really likes Abraham Lincoln, which is cool because he's pretty fantastic. Anyways, but yeah, judge not that ye not be judged is just a fantastic rule to live by. This is another quote. Don't judge them. They are just what we would be under other circumstances. This is the key to empathy. Yeah, just to understand their life situations and the fact that you would be exactly like they were if you had to go through their trauma and etc. Or there's a very high likelihood that you would be in the same wheelhouse as them if you went through their same pain. So do your best not to focus on the negative aspects of the character instead of focusing on the good parts. And it talks about how to help people, how to lessen the things you dislike about a person, and how to heighten the good parts, of course. I will speak ill of no man and speak all the good I know of everybody. Love that one. That one's great too. Understand why people do what they do. This breeds understanding and furthermore tolerance. To know all is to forgive all. That's hearkening to the one thing, which is we'd be the same as them under a different circumstance. But man, that right there, to know all is to forgive all. If you were to know everything that someone's been through, the pain, the suffering, the everything, the odds of you being yeah, they're still the most worst human being, or the most awful human being I've ever met in my life. No, you'd probably be well, I'm not sure how anyone can come out of that unscathed, and yeah, or maybe they did and they're pretty damn okay for it, So again, that's just one of those things. But essentially, the premise is, do not, under any circumstance, if you can help it, criticize anybody. Criticize, condemn, or complain. Sure, complain is a good one. We all know people that have a tendency to whine, and all it does is make people perceive you as a person who doesn't fix their situation, a person that's weak. I know that's kind of rude to say, but yeah, a person who just constantly it's not fair, the world's against me, I hate it, you have benefited more than me, and I hate you for it, and it's just a nightmare. It's just a constant fucking, yeah. And then criticism. Criticism is the big one that he hits on. Do not criticize others. And you guys may be like, but Grin, there's good reasons to criticize some people. Because they're terrible or they do bad actions. And his whole premise, which I agree with largely, is, again, if you're trying to extract honey, do not kick over the beehive. What that means is, if you are trying to stop somebody's bad behavior, you don't do that by telling them that they're awful, that they're a piece of shit, because what you do when you do that is you destroy any goodwill that you've built with that person. And that is basically the keys to how you change anybody, is to motivate them, to offer an incentive, and then also to build goodwill. If you don't have any of those, and no one's going to do anything for you because they owe you or want to give you nothing. If you build goodwill, they have the desire to keep you around. They might change, especially if you do it tactfully and softly. And if you have a motivation, if you know their motivations, you can pivot and understand where to push them in the direction that would maybe make them move that way. And then incentive is quite literally saying, if you do this, I'll give you this, or knowing what this is that would make them move. It's kind of a little bit of motivation as well, but I digress. Anyways, principle 1, do not criticize. Do your best to not criticize. There are other ways to get to that end. We're trying to achieve the end of seeing behavior that we like less. then that is the end. The best way to get that to that end is not to say that you're awful at this, I hate this part about you, you're the worst. It's just going to make people build up bigger walls and not change at all for you. And you're just going to have another enemy in the world. Principle 2, give honest, sincere appreciation. This is one of the foundations for the book. One of the things that this author continues to come back to, which is brilliant, is this deep-seated human connection of importance. People on the planet desire for a lot of things. Some have said it's love, some have said it's value, some who have said a bunch of different things, but one that kind of synopsizes all of them is importance. Everyone on the planet desires to feel important, to feel like their actions matter, like they matter, like their effect on others has made an effect on others, that their actions have meaning and purpose. Essentially, make people feel important, and it will take you a very, very long way. So, another way of wording this is give honest, sincere appreciation. You don't want to just throw a bunch of lavish praise at someone which you don't mean at all, because they could call you out on it and you would be lying, and also you'd be caught up in, well, if you really think I'm this way, then why do you think that way? And you'd be like, So you want to be genuine in this pursuit of acknowledging and constantly scanning those around you and understanding the value that you see in them, the effort that they're putting into the world, the appreciating them more or less. Essentially, this is the big secret to dealing with people, is to constantly fill them with appreciation. Yes, this author believes that the deepest urge in human nature is the desire to feel importance. It is a craving. Say to that craving. It's kind of him hinting at a hunger for this, which is again why he says, like, feed that hunger constantly, and people will. You're the provider. You're providing them that nourishment. They're gonna look to you as this person to want to be around because you're giving them one of the things that they need, which is to feel validated and to feel important and like they matter in the world. Which most people, if not everyone, does. All right, I wrote down a bunch of jot notes. Applaud someone's achievements, to notice their hardships, to take notice of what others do not, to appreciate the simple little things that you would like to see more of. If you want warmth, love, and kindness, you must first give it. Be genuine. I consider my ability to arouse enthusiasm amongst my people to be the greatest asset I possess. The way to establish that is with appreciation and encouragement. This is a lot of the book takes from like stories, by the way. So again, that's why the book is so convincing, is because it goes through this author's like lifetime goal of trying to make people more. Like understand interpersonal relationships, like how to make that better. That was his journey he went on writing this book, and he constantly had 1,000 different students and wrote down their like lessons, their experiences, and conveys the lessons in these books in stories. So one of the things is a lot of these quotes are coming from people who were in business, people who have family problems, people who convinced other people how to do crazy things, people who got this job and won in this and that way, and it's all anecdotal, but I'm just going to read off them because, yeah, time is precious. We're running out of it. Let's move on. Okay, now I kind of blended both of these into one. But this is the other principle, and I think it's valid to talk about it because it's kind of intertwined within give honest, sincere appreciation. So principle 2 is give honest, sincere appreciation. Principle 3 is become genuinely interested in other people. So you guys see what I mean by this book isn't really all about like this is how you get a person to do whatever you want. It's not like trying to be hyper manipulative. If anything, it's like no. This is how you just become a better human being and a better communicator and a person that can build others up, and etc., etc., etc. So again, principle 3 is to become genuinely interested in other people. And at first, this may have to be mechanical or like a conscious effort, but eventually this will become super easy. And again, becoming genuinely interested in other people will help you appreciate them more. Honest appreciation, principle 2, you'll be able to do that with greater ease because you're constantly thinking and acknowledging other people's effort, hardship, and of course importance in the world and in your life for that matter. So here's a bunch of jot notes. No criticism, lavish praise. Acknowledge others' greatness. Reward behavior you want to see more of. Above all else, make sure people feel appreciated. Nourish their self-esteem the same way you would nourish hunger. or their hunger. And this harkens back to, this is like a deep-seated need. Appreciation and the feeling of feeling importance is essentially somebody's self-esteem, and that's one of the beautiful things in this book, which we'll get to. But one of the ways the author constantly does this is how to make somebody feel important. Okay, well, if you're like, I don't know how to answer that, and you're like, okay, how do you nourish somebody's self-esteem? And you're like, I have one answer. You're like, okay, how do you appreciate somebody? What would you say to want to make someone feel appreciated? And you're like, oh, okay, maybe you answered one of those questions. Out of the three that you're like, oh, I have an answer for one of those, I would do it that. Oh, okay, maybe self-esteem. Okay, self-esteem, I would gas them up. I would make them feel like what they're saying is valuable, matters, and importance. You know what I mean? So that's the beauty of this book, is that it asks those questions, I think. And some people would fire back at me and say, well, Grin, why would I become genuinely interested in other people? I got a lot going on. Maybe you're just, you don't like people, which is, a whole thing. Maybe you're like, I don't want to honestly appreciate anybody because no one appreciates me. Well, we'll get into that, but in order to be appreciated, you need to appreciate others. It's funny because there's an anecdote in the book which is amazing, but it talks about one of the leading causes back in the 80s or whatever for divorce being so high was that both parties were not appreciated, and I could totally see that. But it's a sentiment of like the wife spends the whole day cleaning the house, making everything beautiful, makes a delicious meal, and then the husband comes home, eats the meal, and sits on the couch and doesn't compliment her and her effort at all. Despite it was hard. And some of you guys could be like, yeah, that's what an asshole, what a piece of shit. But then the husband goes to a job he hates every day and only gets shit on by his boss and all of this horrible shit, only to come home and for his wife not to acknowledge his effort. So it's just like, it's, again, both, in order to see appreciation, you should first give it. Anyways, I keep jumping ahead a little bit. Okay, so this is the big one. The difference between appreciation and flattery is one is sincere and the other is insincere. So stay away from flattery. Again, to me, the difference of flattery is this is the way you could find out if you're genuinely appreciating someone, if you're not. If somebody fires back at you and says, okay, well, why am I like that? Why do you appreciate that about me? And you have nothing to say, then you're flattering someone. You haven't actually analyzed the person's effort, their importance, their everything. Instead, you've just been like, oh, I bet they'd like to hear that they're pretty. Yeah, they're pretty. And then they're like, okay, really? Am I pretty? What makes me pretty? And you're like, your shoes. Something stupid. Not like, oh, your eyes, I appreciate your makeup. You always have a cool new hairstyle to constantly try. You put yourself out there. That's fantastic. Things like that. You'd have a reason because you analyze them, or you take acknowledgement of their effort and etc. So that's how I would determine the difference between flattery and appreciation. Is if somebody asks you, well, wait, why do you appreciate that about me? And you have no answer, or if your answer is like half-assed, then you're probably aiming at flattery, and you probably should aim at appreciation to find the wonderful parts about a person's character, soul, identity, whatever, and build that up. Here's a beautiful quote. I shall pass this way but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to another human being, let me do it now. Let me not differ nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. Essentially, you're only going to live one life. If you're sitting there on death's door and there is some sort of weird afterlife and you're seeing a reel of your actions and all it is you shitting on people and focusing on the worst characteristics of a person, criticizing everyone around you and not building up anybody, it's going to be a pretty bad end of life reel. Whereas if it's filled with you constantly acknowledging the wonder in other human beings and building them up and making them feel fantastic and sparking creativity, love, and life into so many others, I think that'd be a pretty good ending to a otherwise somber note. Anyways, yeah, and this is the last one of becoming genuinely interested in other people, is we are interested in others that are interested in us. Very rarely are you just going to be like, that's a person I want to acknowledge or learn about. It's usually someone who seeks interest in us, asks us questions, makes us feel fantastic, builds goodwill with us, and then people are like, oh, or it's just, if you're living in Canada like I am, it's just courtesy, just manners. It's just like, how are you? I'm great. How are you? It's like a polite off, and it's annoying, but it's also charming. I digress. That's essentially just a huge thing. Is if people are like, I don't want to become interested in other people, or do I really need to do that? Could I just gas them up? Well, yeah, you need to become genuinely interested in order for the appreciation to even work. But also, that's how you benefit. People don't realize that a lot of times, if you show genuine interest in other people and you're genuinely present in the conversation, then people have a tendency to also eventually ask about you. And also you can cater that experience to you. Okay, so this one's funny. This one's because this book is so old. I feel like this is what a lot of people have said but have not been able to articulate in this way. But essentially, principle 4 is smile. And I laugh because I hear this complaint from ladies so often, where they're like a douche will essentially come up to them and be like, you know what, you should smile more. And it's just like, get away from me, ass. Anyways, but this book puts it into a much better perspective of why the importance of smiling and just expression and all those kinds of things are so fundamentally important to everything. Long story short, he says, smiling is incredibly important. It shows people you're happy to see them or welcoming. Think of how you feel when you see an overly expressive dog, to happy to see his owner. Your smile is a message of goodwill. Your smile brightens the lives of all that may see it. Again, a lot of these are excerpts from the book, or my twisted brain finding ways to memorize it with greater ease. By the way, this is just a huge Word document of that's what I'm looking at, my jot notes essentially of every book, because that's best how I learn. And some of you guys were like, Grin, share it with us, and then I'd be like, my spelling errors are out of this world, please. Please. But yes, this goes into the importance of the communication aspect of smiling, of like how we evolved was to visually be able to see things. And when somebody smiles, that means they're happy to see us or whatever. And I get that, like, the dog example is rough, but it's true. When you come home and you see a dog super hella expressive, like tail wagging, body vibrating, panting because he's so excited and happy to see you, you're immediately just equally as excited, or if not more, to see your best boy in the world, you know? But you can also go deeper with this. Like, one of the things in the book that they talked about is how a lot of like marketers or like telemarketers, people who phone you on the phone and ask you to buy shit, not great, but they did a bunch of tests to see how efficient people could be at selling things through the phone, and they did a lot of research that said, weirdly enough, speaking with a smile or speak with a warm, loving cadence can make the biggest difference ever when it comes to selling something or people working with you. So if you're like, hey sir, yeah, I'm from customer support, yeah, we'll be with you in a moment, and stutter like a mental patient. Anyways, or if you're like, yes sir, we'll get to you in just 1 second. We're kind of busy right now. Give me 1 minute. I'll be with you in a moment. Like the difference of talking with warmth and like trying to be understanding, patient, and gentle can make a huge difference within the psychology of a lot of people. Because one of the things that's important, I think, to like elaborate more into this principle, but a lot of human beings operate under a lot of different things. Some people operate under the guise of visual cues. Some people operate under the guise of hearing cues. Some people go through the guise of like intention and feeling and all this other stuff. A long story short, there's 1,000 different ways people can perceive things, a lot of them being things that we can output, whether that be the way we look, whether that be the way we talk, whether that be the words that we use, whether that be the cadence in our voice, all those things. Why not try to sufficiently have control over all of these things? That way you have the best possible odds to make a person feel comfortable around you, able to work with you, feeling like they want to be around you, etc. So smile, people, but also for reasons that were described and not because you look tired. I'm so sorry, ladies. Anyways, or dudes, I'm sure that also gets thrown around too. Principle 5, remember that a person's name to that person is the sweetest sound in any language. This is the one that I feel like aged kind of out of society, but not quite. But yeah, I think with my generation, it's a little bit less incredibly important, just because we came up with it in the age of like Reddits and Twitters and Facebooks, where you had a bunch of weird alias names, and it kind of was like whatever. But I digress. Essentially, just to like hammer home that a lot of people but can have this like importance tied to their name, is think of all the billionaires and whatnot who have attached their name to their best business and built that up to high hell. Ford being kind of one of them, etc. But anyways, there's just being a ton of those instances of people who like just value their name, and honestly, it makes sense why someone would value their name. It's their mark on the world. It's the thing that defines them. It's the thing that is them to some extent. So a lot of people have a greatly cherish their name. And I feel like the one thing I have seen is a lot of people get upset when people mispronounce or missay their name. I've just, again, dyslexia, weirdness. It's hard for me to remember names, to put it simply. So I don't get that whole sentiment. But I have seen people get frustrated immensely by the sentiment of you not actually being able to remember people's names. So I know that there is an importance to it, and yeah, and it's interesting because in this chapter you can also like add some minutia to asking somebody's name. He says to say stuff like this: if you don't mind me asking, how does one pronounce your name? You see, I would like to not forget you, or you're someone who's not worth forgetting, or your name is so unique I would love to remember it. So like things like that, where like you can add why their name is important to you, and therefore that could be appreciated, if that makes any sense. So it's a weird kind of like a passive thing I heard when I was listening to the stories that he was telling, was like, oh, you can like add some like sauce on it, where like the person could be like me and who's like, yeah, I don't really care if anyone like, you know, if fucks up my name, it doesn't matter to me, you know. But if a person was like, hey, I want to remember you, I'd be like, oh, well, why, thank you. Yeah. Although my name's Logan and it's super easy to remember. Anyways, you know, Wolverine, yeah, just like that. All right. And then this is how to remember names, but it's ask people how to say it, use it a lot in conversation, remember characteristics that they have and attach it to their name constantly. And if you can't, if that last resort is just to write it down like a madman, and do that. There's plenty of people in history that have used this in a great way. Also, one of the things that the book mentions is that a person's name is the first bridge of building goodwill. So, like, again, the whole process of communication, especially in how to make friends and how to make people like you and etc., is to build goodwill. So, in the process of building goodwill, remembering their names and like a handshake and all these things are like the first formalities of the process of building goodwill. A process that I fall short on a great deal, but you know, I try to get all the other things in line. I try to acknowledge people's greatness quite a lot. Anyway, principle 4. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. This is hilarious because this book is like, I kid you not, the grandfather of self-help books. Like, this is one of the ones, it's super old. Like, everyone talks about how like people have heard stuff like the smile comment and all these other things. And I feel like so many people have communicated with other people who have probably read this book and then communicated like half-assedly the information, and that person that they communicated with only took a piece of that pie. But it's I've heard the sentiment of encourage others to talk about themselves. Everyone loves hearing their own voice. Just constantly let them do that. But they miss out on the first part of it, which is the most important, which is be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. If you're just if you're just like, again, to me this one can be really misperceived in a bad way. But again, the process is to listen, to intake information. Otherwise, it's just going to be a one-sided conversation, which is what you don't want by any means. And I feel like this runs the risk of that. Also, a person will eventually get sick of holding the conversation. Like, that's something that people talk about constantly, but it's like, I'm tired of like holding the conversation and being the only one giving an effort. The thing that changes that is if you are truly listening and truly being interested in other people. But I digress. Some jot notes for this, for the principle of be a good listener and encourage others to talk about themselves, is be an interested listener. That's another way you could word it. Be interested in listening to other people. Don't just be like, hey, what about the game? And then completely tune out. Or how was school? Completely tunes out. You know what I mean? Like, or like, it was like, okay, no, let's genuinely, I'm gonna ask you follow-up questions. I'm gonna be genuinely interested in what you're saying, or trying to be, or even just perceiving myself to be, just so that you can have a great time and gas you up, essentially. Listen attentively. Listen because you are genuinely interested. Something that everyone desires is a good listener. All right, this is pretty important. Listening to someone is to give them attention. This is something that when I heard, I was just like, oh yeah, that's weirdly how it is. Because some people could, like, your girlfriend could be like, hey, you don't pay attention to me, or like whatever, and it's really like, again, the person just wants to like resonate with you, and how best to do that is to just let them talk at you. Now again, you're not trying to just make it so that they do all the talking. That's a bad idea. We'll go through all these and then I'll elaborate. These are just my own weirdness. Do not become drunk on your own importance. Dissolve the ego. And yeah, it's just my brain, it's the way I process things, and hearing other media that I've watched, that's just an idea of something. But anyways, to be a good conversationalist is to be a good listener. To be interesting is to be interested. Huge. To be interesting is to be interested. Again, a lot of conversation in general is a push-pull kind of thing. If you're not going to genuinely ask people what they got going on, how can you expect them to do the same for you? And there's a weird goodwill being passed back and forth. Ask questions that the other person would enjoy answering. Weird loaded question because it doesn't give you any specifics, which I've heard before. This thing of ask interesting questions, but it's what's that? What are interesting questions? Anyways, we'll get into it in a minute. Encourage them to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. Okay, so this is something I want to elaborate on because this is the one that I feel like can be destructive, because it's the notion of to be a good listener. And to constantly get people to talk about themselves. Okay, let's give an example. So say you're going on a date with a beekeeper. Weird, but there she is. And what you could do is just talk about what you got going on, all about your life, or you could be like, well, wait, you're a beekeeper. That's interesting. What's that like? And then you could basically tune out, and then she could just keep talking about bees, or it most likely will happen, because a lot of people are becoming more introverted. They'll be like, yeah, it's just a weird hobby. It's honey, basically. I just like honey, so I found a way to get honey. I looked it up online, and I learned some stuff. And they'll try to shut down their own thing. And this is where be a good listener and basically be an interested listener. I feel like this whole thing should be reworded as be an interested listener rather than be a good listener, because interested is the key to the puzzle, essentially. If a person did try to shut themselves down like that, you would just keep opening them back up, constantly feeding the flame, gassing them up, trying to keep their flame burning for this interest. And if they're not interested, then they're burnt out on talking about it because it's maybe their job or whatever. But if not, you could ask follow-up questions of being like, okay, well, what got you into to that, or to beekeeping, or what are the processes of doing it? And I've always been scared about getting stung. Is that a misconception? And then a person might light up and be like, actually, bees are super super nice, and yeah, if they also go out like a light if you hit them with smoke, so there's no the process, and they may get really excited because you're genuinely being interested in what they're saying, and you're genuinely listening. But I feel like the problem that a lot of people could have in this is okay, so how do you like bees? And then they just reel back, and I feel like I've seen this many times on with just certain. I've seen people talk about dates that they go on with girls, and girls aren't contributing to the conversation, and the guy takes it as a slight, but they may just be trying to let you talk about you because maybe they've had bad experiences of the minute they start talking about them, the person seems disinterested, or people belittle them, or whatever may be. Horrible situations going on with all sides of people. but again, I think that's the biggest thing that I could possibly suggest is to be a good listener is to be an interested listener, to constantly engage with what the person is talking about, into even feign, if you must, enjoyment of the subject or curiosity of the subject. But in reality, I think eventually, it's the kind of make it till you become it, but I feel like eventually you'll become genuinely interested in other people, because you'll eventually find someone that tells you something cool and interesting, and you're like, hey, I got to this end by maybe asking questions I didn't even know I'd be interested in, but here we go. Now I have more information at my disposal. Maybe that can help me in the future with this and that thing, or maybe I just built a lot of goodwill with a nice character, and I made a friend in the world, or I made a person that could help me in the future if I asked them for help because I built that goodwill, and right? And then this one kind of goes into that, but it's principle 5. Talk in terms of the other person's interest. And this to me is hilarious, because I read this and I thought, I learned this lesson from my grandma, who used to always, no one in my family used to talk about video games when I was younger, and she would always, I totally understood she didn't care about it, but she just pretended to give a crap. And it's one of the most fondest memories I have, is just talking to someone who genuinely was listening and genuinely gave a shit or pretended to give a shit. And it's one of those things where it's that can mean so much, is even just talking in terms of the other person's interests and building off of that and genuinely being a communication kind of communicationalist, rather than just being a person who's again, forcing the other person to carry the conversation. Again, you're trying to, if you ever feel like someone's carrying the conversation, you're trying to build a fire, and if they're carrying the conversation, then the flame is about to go out, and you don't want that to happen. But yeah, you want people to feel excited and want to tell you things because they know you would be interested or like hearing about it, and that forms a connection with other human beings. Anyways, we're going a little too deep into the to become genuine or be a good listener. Anyways, one of the anecdotes that they talk about in this specific principle of talk in terms of other people's interests was this amazing story about how there was this like gentleman man who came by this mom and son's house, and the son was out playing with airplanes in the yard, and this like gentleman in like an amazing top hat and shit came out and talked to this kid while he was waiting for the mom to write papers or something. Yet I don't know what he did, but regardless, he talked to the kid, and the kid just lit up with excitement. The mom seen them like chatting about stuff in the yard, and then the man walked away, and the mom asked what you guys were talking about, and the boy said, yeah, he was really into airplanes, and yeah, it was awesome. And then the mom said, oh, Timmy, like he didn't give a fuck about airplanes. He was just interested in letting you talk about airplanes. And I just thought that was such an amazing moment. But yeah, it's like the sentiment is find what other people are passionate about and feed that fire the best to the best of your abilities, and you'll find people open up and just spring with love, affection, and joy. I've been privy to that so many times. It's one of my favorite things on the planet. I digress. The final principle for how to make people like you, essentially, or befriend people, or how to make people feel like they want to be around you, or any of these things, is principle 6. Make the other person feel important, and do it sincerely. So again, all of the things we talked about, kind of the appreciation, you become genuinely interested in other people, be a good listener, all of these things, smile, all these things, essentially facilitate, more or less, to making somebody feel important, making somebody feel, to some extent, acknowledged, loved, some could say. Some could say a feeling of desire, whatever you want to crack it. Again, importance is what this author determines to kind of be this umbrella statement of the kind of deeper meaning behind what might be love, or it might be all of these other things. Again, in the pursuit to understand how to make people feel important, the author does an amazing job about asking you different questions that lead you to the same end. Like, what is it about other people that you could admire? So again, changing the sentiment of how could you find importance within another person? How could you appreciate another person? How could you and then now it's how can you find out what you admire about other people. They all lead you to the same end, but they're just thousands of different ways of answering the question. Hopefully one of them sparks an idea in your head and you're like, oh, admire. Oh, I admire so many things about so many people. I admire things about my mom. I admire things about my dad. So I just got to apply that same process about other people in the world. Okay, can I do that? Yes, and then you'd go from there. He has a story about how he like finds this person and basically compliments the fact that he has a full set of hair, and the young man is like, yeah, and he's just super jazzed. So again, just like finding these things that you can find or admire about others. Like, oh, your height is something that I wish I had back when I was playing basketball, and then a person could be like, oh, that's awesome. And not only that, but you've communicated the fact that you used to play basketball, so that could be a conversation thing, You could also go with something that's a little bit more grounded. This is something that I personally, but I would not compliment appearance too heavily outside of like clothing choice and maybe hairstyle for women, but work ethic is one of the things that's written down here as well. Is like you could commend someone's capacity to work and etc. And that could be perceived as like that. Hey, I admire your work ethic. I appreciate how hard you're working here. I notice it. It's incredible. It's certainly making my life easier, and I appreciate that immensely. That something that you could say to someone, especially a person who's busting their ass and like tired as hell. I could give them like, hey, fucking hell yeah, thank you, man, like I appreciate that, you're doing a good job too, you look at you. And that's again one of the things is when you appreciate other people, they tend to like try to be like, okay, wait, now let me try to compliment you. And it could be half-assed, but at least it gets their mind thinking about the positives of you to some extent. Again, the classic adage, do unto others that you would want done unto you. You would want people to acknowledge your effort, to appreciate you, to love you, to make an effort to understand the things that you like and are interested in. So do unto others in which you would want to be done unto you. These are just some anecdotes. When asking someone to do anything, surround it with lavish praise, reassure them that they are the best for the job, and that they would be of great help to you, and that they are the first person that came to mind to handle such a task. again, in the book, in this chapter specifically, he goes into like I think there's a story, and I might be pulling a story from one of the parts in the book, but if I'm not mistaken, he has his anecdote where he talks about that there are these, he has these two secretaries, and he goes to like a dance for his children or something like that, and they came with him really quick, or something like that, some sort of weird, or maybe it was like a business party, regardless. He gets put into like the manager role, and he asks one of his secretaries, in a very clever way, he says, you're always so much better than counting or keeping track of numbers than me. Could you please handle like the money and the billing for people who are coming into this party? And then he compliments the other secretary or something to the effect of like, hey, you're wonderful at communication skills, are unmatched. Could you greet people when they come in? I'm sure they would love to see a wonderful smile as they're entering the door. You know, it's moments like that of making people want to feel like they want to do the things for you, whether that's building goodwill, making them feel like they could earn it, making them feel like they're the best person for the job, you know, making them feel like they could do it effortlessly because they're them. Those things, you know, that again, like making people feel important, valued, understood, seen, all of these things. Oh, and then this was the moment of the book where I teared up. They have, okay, so this is not like a principle, but this is just an anecdote from How to Make People Feel Important. Most people want to be told that they are good enough, and they are good enough. There's a part in the story where the man who writes this book, a brilliant man, it talks about his instances, and I'm going to boil down the story just for time's sake, but essentially he's a teacher in a class, and he's teaching communication skills the same way he's teaching us in this book, but it's for younger kids. Let's say they're like maybe grade 4 or 5 or maybe 6 or something like that. Anyways, he ends up having this higher tier of class, like this better class that's for people who have a gift with communication skills or just seem like they have a great effort or whatever it may be. So it's kind of got this prestige to it. Anyways, a slot opens up in that class, so he ends up essentially going through the work thing, and he finds this one boy who's an incredibly quiet kid, but he has a lot of potential, and he goes through great efforts to do the work in the worksheets, and he's covered a lot of ground. Essentially, the man who's the writer of the book and everything goes up to this kid and says, "Young man, I'm choosing you to be part of this higher tier of class." And this kid starts kind of getting like teary-eyed, and the teacher is kind of like, what do you like? What's happening? Are you okay? Like, and the boy kind of says, "Well, sir, do you really think I'm good enough?" And the teacher takes a minute, and he bends down to his desk, and he says the child's name, and he says, "You are more than good enough." And the teacher has to leave the room because he was starting to cry. But it's this moment of like everybody on the planet has this deep-seated want, desire to feel like they are good enough. Yes, people want to improve, people want to be all these things, but at the end of the day, it's why like mothers and fathers and to some extent exist. And for people who don't have this, it pains me, and it's all the more reason to try to be that for other people, or to be that to those people. But to hear the notion of no matter what you are, no matter what you become right now, as you are more than good enough. Or you are good enough to do this thing. You don't think you're worthy? Fuck that, you absolutely are. You have the capacity for this thing, to do this challenging thing 100%. I believe in you. You can do this. Everybody in the world wants to feel like they are enough. And I feel like that's a good key to someone's heart, is to constantly make them feel like they are, well, more than enough. So here is us breaking down, yeah, I'll do it like that, I guess. Yikes. Anyways, this is what we just recapped in a nutshell. Principle 1, become genuinely interested in other people. We talked about how important that is. That's huge. Principle 2, smile. Principle 3, remember that a person's name to that person is the sweetest sound in any language. That one may have aged not great. Anyways, Principle 4, be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Principle 5, talk in terms of other people's interest. And principle 6, make others feel important and do it sincerely. Okay, so the next part is how to win someone over to your side. This is how to influence people, and then the last chapter is essentially how to be a leader. If you're put in a leadership role, how to do this. Okay, so here's what's happening. I looked at the thing and I seen that it's an hour. We're already at now 54 minutes. That was 6 principles. The next one, if I'm not mistaken, is 12. That's double. I wrote down a lot more for those as well, because I was really getting in the flow of things, and I was like, yeah. Also, it's just a sea of constant notes. so essentially, and then we finally got to the end. I'll be making many more. Well, no, I'll make 2 more. It's fine. I'll make 2 more of these. So this is the one on how to essentially make people want to be around you, enjoy being around you, feel valued by being around you. And then the next one is going to be about how the hell do you essentially convince someone to your side, which if anyone has family members who maybe have some strong beliefs, this is huge. This is huge for just empathizing with them, understanding where they're coming from, but also to some extent convincing them. And I'll give you guys an understanding of the first bit where you can kind of understand where this is coming from. Principle 1 on how to bring someone to your side. Principle 1. The only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Now, before you maybe jump to too many conclusions, give me a minute. People always try to save face, try to avoid the acute angle, avoid arguments. This is where this guy is coming from in this thing. He says, avoid arguments, embrace disagreements. And he has this great line, you cannot win an argument. If you lose an argument, you lose. And if you win an argument, you still lose. Because all you've won, if you've won an argument, is an empty victory where you did not build any goodwill. And that is essentially the keys to how to make somebody win over to your side. Is you build goodwill, you hear them out, you let them understand that you're not trying to tear them down, or that you're trying to make them to break their pride down and say that they're wrong. You're trying to instead just give them more information, trying to win them to your side. And again, there is this weird skewed thing, which I want to talk about a lot in the next part where we go into this, but there's a weird skewed thing of like facts and logic. Facts and logic don't mean shit if a person just believes that you're gonna stab them, or you're gonna attack them, or you want the worst for them. They're just gonna close up and seal up immediately. If you're truly trying to extend the olive branch and to try to say, hey, I think that there is another angle to this, and I think if we thought about it together, we might come to similar conclusions, and maybe we don't. And if that's the case, why not just take this journey together? Worst case scenario, we all have a little bit of an understanding of what each other thinks. Big whoop, And a lot of it is like constantly try to avoid your first initial take. So when someone is trying to like convince you or like disagree with you or like have an argument with you, try to stay away from, they're trying to change me, or they're trying to tell me that I'm wrong. Ignore your first initial response. And then there's another one in here which I want to talk to you guys about, but essentially it's this is what helped me with this whole premise about like avoiding arguments, or how to constantly stay in the realm of disagreements and not arguments. Fully believe that the other person only is trying to help you. That's it. The person only is trying to help you because they think that you're going down a rough path. And why would you try to fight someone who's trying to genuinely help you? And of course, they may genuinely be wrong. I'm not saying you should just cave and agree with what they're saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying just that, again, this should keep you in the realm of, okay, we disagree. We just disagree. Now let's understand where we disagree, and then let's try to build more bridges than barriers. And therefore, maybe we can find a thing. And also, be comfortable with not being right. I feel like that's the thing that people will, even if they know they're wrong, they'll still never say that they're wrong, because they know that at the end of this, though, there's going to be a, I told you so, can't believe you believe that. You're going to hold it over them forever, and it's terrible. Whereas if you're the kind of person that doesn't even say, I don't need you to say that I'm right. I just want you to understand where I'm coming from, and I hope that we can make sense of this, and that's it. Then a person will be like, well, a person will constantly want to engage with you because there's no negative. You're never gonna hold the "you're wrong, haha, I told you you're wrong, you're an idiot." You're just gonna be like, okay, cool, yeah, okay, that makes more sense, right? Okay, perfect. And then it's done. It's not like we're trying to twist the knife. But ladies and gentlemen, that was me for an hour, more or less, talking about an amazing book called How to Make Friends and Influence People. And again, it is so much not that of like how to influence people, how to manipulate them, how to get them to do this, that, or the other. Everything we've talked about is just basically how to be a warm, loving human being where people want to be around, and how to build up others, and how to acknowledge others' efforts, because everything, and again, do unto others what you would like to be done unto yourself is the kind of sentiment of the book to some extent. Is hopefully by becoming the man or the woman that does all of these things, hopefully that you'll find a person in your life that does them back to you, which you deserve 100%. And yeah. And again, there's another book that I want to talk to you guys about as well. It's kind of like if this book is yin, that book is yang, or the bad one, whichever the one bad one is. Anyways, this one's the light. The other book is the dark, which we'll talk about as well. I got 2 books to talk you guys' ear off about. Bunch of notes for both of them, just like an endless sea of notes. So. Anyways, this has been a review for the first section of How to Make Friends and Influence People, which is very much the process of making people want to be around you, to like being around you, to make friends, to make happier acquaintances and stuff like that. But I digress, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Again, this is something we'll do constantly on the channel. I'm constantly looking at like self-help books and whatnot. So yeah, and also me in the future who's watching this as just a review. Did I do a terrible job? Are you still going to go back and rewatch the book or re-listen to the book? Because, it's easy to listen to an audiobook. But also, it's just a great book. Enjoy it. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully you guys do enjoy the rest of your day. We'll make more content like this for sure. I will continue to do more parts. Finishing up the book, we have 2 more parts to do, I think, unless we just breeze through the other ones really fast, which I don't think we will, because there are a lot more. I digress. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully you guys do enjoy the rest of your day. Subscribe button's over there, as well as 2 videos further that way. Thank you for your time, and goodbye.